This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry made a surprise trip to Baghdad today to meet with Iraq's Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki. Ahead of his arrival, Kerry signaled the Obama administration's prepared to drop support for Maliki, calling for leadership, quote, prepared to represent all of Iraq. Kerry's visit to Baghdad comes as Sunni militants with the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, ISIS, have captured more territory. Over the weekend, ISIS militants seized 3 border crossings with Syria and Jordan, as well as 4 nearby towns. An Iraqi government airstrike, meanwhile, has reportedly killed at least 7 civilians and wounded 12 others in the ISIS-held Tikrit. Residents say Army helicopters fired on civilian cars lined up at a gas station. The Iraqi government's claiming it only killed insurgents. We go directly to Baghdad, where we're joined by Patrick Coburn, Middle East correspondent for The Independent. One of his recent headlined articles is "In Baghdad, a city gripped by fear, news is priceless, but ISIS is winning the propaganda war." Patrick, talk about what you're experiencing right now in Baghdad.
Well, Baghdad's a very frightened city. Nobody quite knows what's going to happen. News keeps coming in of further gains by ISIS, or Daesh as it's always called here. The whole of Anbar province, this enormous province to the west, has fallen. And ISIS is only about an hour's drive to the north. Of course, Baghdad is an enormous city, 6 or 7 million people, and the majority are Shia. So people say, well, they'll never break through because of all these armed Shia. But, the fact remains that since the fall of Mosul, the government hasn't won any victories, and ISIS has gone on taking more cities. You see militiamen in the streets of Baghdad. Prices of everything have gone up. A lot of people have got out of the city. Big queues outside the passport office. So there's an atmosphere of barely suppressed panic.
And the significance of Kerry being in Baghdad right now, and what message he is sending to Nouri al-Maliki, the Prime Minister.
Well, I think the message is clearly, leave, go. We need a new Prime Minister. We need a new political leadership. And that will probably happen. The sense I get that all these diplomatic maneuvers with Kerry, with the Iranians, with the Iraqi government are all in slow time. But the advance of ISIS and the extreme Sunni Islamists, is much faster than that. They're really dictating the pace. So, there's no doubt that Maliki has been a disastrous prime minister. Nobody else could have spent that amount of money and had that size an army and just seen it dissolve. But to get somebody better and to get things up and running, it is going to take time, and the time isn't really there.
What is the message that Kerry is sending? I want to turn to comments of the Secretary of State. This is the Secretary of State speaking in Cairo a day before the big verdict came down today on the Al Jazeera reporters who have now been convicted and sentenced to 7 to 10 years in prison. This is what he said in Cairo.
We will help Iraqis to complete this transition if they choose it. If they want, they have an opportunity to choose leadership that can represent all of Iraq, a unity government that brings people together and focus on ISIL. And I am convinced that they will do so, not just with our help, but with the help of almost every country in the region, as well as others in the world, who will always stand up against the tyranny of this kind of terrorist activity.
So the role of the United States and whether Maliki will retain power, and also, Patrick Coburn, the role of Iran.
Well, listening to Kerry, I get the sort of feeling that he hasn't quite got a grip on the situation. I mean, the people who have taken Mosul and taken most of northern and western Iraq really aren't interested in a unity government. What they've been doing is killing Shia in large numbers, Shia villages, just south of Kirkuk were driven out of their homes, I think it was yesterday, and machine gunned. 21 tribal chiefs in the same area were reported executed. That's what ISIS, the Islamic State, is all about. So, the idea is you could have a government which would include Sunni and Kurds, which we sort of have already in Baghdad, but this would be more representative, and then the main leaders of the Sunni community, apart from ISIS and some of the Baathists, would sort of rally to the government. But it's by no means clear that would happen, because the situation has changed, because these towns are now under the control of ISIS, and it will be very difficult to get them out. So I think there's a certain amount of, quite a lot of wish fulfillment and fantasy in what Kerry is saying. You asked about Iran. The Iranians, one, they want to protect this government. They want to protect Baghdad. They want to, but at the same time, they don't want to see a new government installed, which in their eyes would see Maliki, who's sort of pro-Iranian or under Iranian influence, by a prime minister who's under American influence. This has not been good news for the Iranians, what has happened. The government that they supported, is very clearly a dysfunctional and disastrous government. So they're arguing, well, we'll keep it in, the first thing is to deal with this attack from ISIS, and then we'll think about changing the government. But of course, if that attack is dealt with, the government won't change. And if the government doesn't change, then it's very unlikely there's going to be much progress